Board meeting for Wednesday, October 4th, 2017 to order. This is our opportunity for public comment. If anyone has anything they'd like to say in connection with anything, I guess, is the rule, or with this meeting tonight, that's matters not specifically to be adjudicated by the board within the agenda, that now is the time. Does anyone have anything to add? I do. One thing I was thinking, and I'd like to just take the temperature of the board, is possibly amending our agenda today to leave off the discussion of site plan review for another meeting when it's maybe raining or something like that. It's just that it's a beautiful evening. If people wanted to get back home, since we don't have anything else on our agenda other than a small item, which won't take long. What's the temperature?
Ooh. Okay.
Looking for an argument, change the subject.
I know that Kate worked on doing this, and it does involve section 1900, which we actually do see a fair amount of. Those are those long staff review summaries. But I wouldn't mind putting it off if people, and maybe when Norm and Jeff could be here as well. Is that okay with you, Kate?
It's up to you guys. Full disclosure, I stopped working on it because I kind of thought you guys would all be like, yeah, let's move it.
All right, so, and then I would like to move to amend the agenda to move section 5 or item 5 on the agenda to another meeting. Can I have a second to that motion?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Okay, so let's do that. The next item on our agenda is a rule amendment to allow for oh, right, sorry, yeah, sorry. Also, Norm, I'm trying to get used to the idea of asking for conflicts or ethical issues to anything on the agenda beforehand. I'm not going to do that today for obvious reasons, but does anyone, we have to approve the minutes of the September 20th meeting. Does anyone have anything to add or amend or change on the minutes?
I just have one thing, and it's probably small, but on page 5, the second to last paragraph, which begins Norm Blaze referred to, the second to last sentence says, Mr. Burris argued the drafters are distinguishing homes from the bylaws. Distinguishing homes in the bylaws? Anybody?
I agree with that.
Okay, any other changes to the minutes for September 20? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved.
Second?
Seconded.
All in favor?
Aye.
I'm going to abstain because I wasn't at the meeting and I haven't reviewed the meeting on the TV. Okay, so the next matter on our agenda is a hearing for an amendment to the rules of procedure. This is to add a new rule. It would be a rule that would allow for staged and partial review, meaning really in the plainest of terms, that we could do kind of mini reviews of not the whole thing if for circumstances outside the control of the applicant or because of unusual circumstances, it makes sense to do some sort of partial review. I'm going to turn the discussion over to Kate so she can tell us all a little bit about the genesis of this, and then we can talk about the rule. Kate?
Okay, so, yeah, all right, so we have rules of procedure, and since we're on the record, kind of got into the thought process of, okay, if we're going to do certain things, we should probably create an actual procedure for them. Currently in our bylaws, we have a procedure for staged review, but that doesn't translate over into our rules of procedure. And then staged is distinguished from partial. Staged is basically saying, we're going to go through and you're going to give us a timeline, and we're not going to make you do something until we've looked at other things first. And so you go through, and you don't do findings until you've actually gone through the entire process. But, you know, if because of a traffic study, you just come to a halt, and to go any further would be unduly burdensome to the applicant, this would allow them to kind of just back off without putting a heck of a lot more resources into something that probably isn't going to get it go. Now, in the language that we prepared with Mary, you know, you have to meet certain thresholds. You know, this isn't just like, hey, we're gonna let you go step by step just because. And that is different from partial review, in that partial review requires findings at the end of that partial review, which excludes one part of the application that the applicant just wasn't able to produce because of some extenuating circumstance. And just to give some background, the Planning Commission has done partial reviews, and the DRB has done a partial review in the past. We've just not had an actual procedure for doing it, but like I said, because we're on the record, it's probably just best to integrate it in. And then also, it just eliminates some confusion for any future applications. So per the rules of procedure, I had to get the language out to you guys at least 24 hours in advance. You got these last week. Hopefully you've had a chance to review. If not, I would definitely encourage you to do so now. And if there's any questions or you feel like language should be added, we can certainly do that. But this is limited to the scope of staged and partial review. We can't change any other part of the rules as part of this.
So just to be clear, that whether to grant a staged or partial review would be within the discretion of the board based on the application. I'm not exactly clear how that would happen. Let's say somebody applies for partial review 3 weeks ahead of time as required, and then you notice it for partial review, but maybe at that time, the board says, well, the reason you're giving us is not good enough, so we're going to deny the request, then the applicant has to be ready right then and there for full review, no? Or would it just be an application for partial grant or deny, and then next time they come around, they're prepared? See what I mean?
Yeah, I think I do see what you're saying. So I don't think it would put them in the position of, you know, I mean, it wouldn't make much sense to
Right.
give this, say, I'm gonna ask for partial review and then have an expectation that they have something other than a partial application ready. So warning it, I think warning it as either a partial review or just warning in
An
the
application.
an application, and when they come in and say, you know, as part of our request with this application, we've also asked that you do partial review. And so you can decide then, okay, what are the circumstances, and they should have provided something, and say, okay, yes, we'll do partial review. And if not, you can certainly continue the application until they're able to produce that information. I mean, technically, you can continue.
Right.
So are you saying then, the very first meeting is to tell the applicant yes or no on partial review? And would we expect the applicant, if we said yes, to perform the partial review right then and there?
Yes, so applicant intention would be, okay, we're asking for the partial review, and we're prepared to present that partial review if you do grant it, and if not, you know, they'll
We'll
have to come back at a
continue it.
later date.
Okay.
Exactly.
Got it. Okay.
Or they withdraw the application.
Yep, that's the other option, is that they completely withdraw.
Would they have to repay a filing fee if they did?
They withdrew the application,
And they then refiled?
I would say most likely yes, because staff time would have gone into it, and we would have warned it, and that costs something, and so, yeah, I mean, it's a bit of a risk, but, you know, to clearly define, you know, you have to meet these certain criteria, and if you're not, you know, you run the risk of losing whatever that application fee might be.
If we don't continue it?
If we don't, yeah. And it would really, unless they decided to withdraw the application, I mean, you could continue it, and
I would think that most people who are filing for partial review, if we were to deny it, they would withdraw the application because they've probably got some sort of reason that they can't come forward with a full application in the near course, in the near term, so they would probably have to withdraw because they're gonna not be capable of completing a full application.
Or they just have to, if they're expecting something to happen, they could just say, you know, can I get a date 4 months out?
Yeah, right.
3 months out, and then if they're not ready by then, they have to come in and ask for another
Yeah,
continuance.
yeah.
yeah.
I don't think there's any limitation on how many continuances we can give them.
I mean, there is, you know, a deadline for filing a complete preliminary application
Right,
and
is it 6
final-
months?
It's 6 months, yeah. I mean, and you can ask for a 6-month extension. I think you can do that twice even, but, yeah, so, and in the interest of full disclosure, I have had a request for partial review, and I kind of had this thought like, oh gosh, we probably need to get this in order, so we have a set standard of how to do this, and hopefully that will happen tonight.
So the benefit to the applicant for partial review is they can invest a certain amount of resource and energy to get the application to us, get us to kind of give our opinions on what we think, and then that guides them as they continue. It's like an incremental.
But don't we kind of do that with
Kind of,
the
That's long,
yeah.
right?
preliminary?
kind of not
Yeah.
though, in the same token. It's not so much a mechanism for people to get like, oh, is this okay? And then keep going
Yeah.
from there. It's more like, hey, you know, we're held up on this one thing that we
Water.
just cannot get right now.
Okay, got it.
And we'd really like to see what you guys think about everything else, and then at the date where that
Okay.
can happen, we'll bring that in for the complete
Okay.
findings.
So, under partial, we actually approve something.
It's like a partial approval, so you
Yeah.
do partial findings.
Partial approval or just contingency approval?
Partial
based on-
approval, you're actually doing findings, and, you know,
Right,
it's gonna
okay.
specifically leave out something that is required as part of a preliminary plan.
And it's on the record.
And it is
It's
on
all
the record.
In stage, we don't give any
Right.
decision until.
It is that more incremental.
Okay.
And it was confusing at first.
It is kind of a fine difference, but
Any other questions?
is everyone good with the criteria that was laid out? You know, do you think if any changes should be made to that? And we can always amend them again if it turns out that somehow it's not
Okay.
working.
Pardon me. All right. In that case, I will move to amend the DRB Rules of Procedure and Conflict of Interest Policy to include the language presented within this memo for partial and staged review. I have a second?
I will second, but just point out that we probably need the word "be" in the list of factors. Shall not be
Right,
limited to.
perfect. With that amendment, can I have a second to the motion?
I think I did second.
Oh, you did? Okay, great.
Subject to the addition of the word.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? None? Motion carries. Any other business? Hearing none, I'll take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
May I have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Great.